We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Thursday afternoon edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. We used to call the final episode of the week the Fun Friday edition, and I am here to tell you we have a lot of ground to cover here on a Friday. This feels like one we're going to hit on 6-7 different topics. They're all fascinating. They're all interesting. It's that time of year, college football crossing over with college basketball. We're going to dive into all of it. I'll be quick so we can get to the show, but we're going to talk college football playoff rankings. No, I'm not giving takes on the rankings, but I'm giving takes on why I think we are inevitably set up for disappointment with the first 12-team college football playoff. From there, we will talk about the big news from today. Bryce Underwood, quarterback, high school prospect. Could he be our first $10 million college football quarterback? We'll give my week 12 picks. And then from there, we got to talk a little bit of basketball because there is a narrative right now. Is it time, coming off of the Champions Classic, to boot Michigan out and Michigan State out and put UConn in? Oh, by the way, John Calipari after Wednesday night says Arkansas is not in a good place. And did you see this? I'm pretty sure Dick Vitale just called out Kentucky fans on Twitter. You got to see this to believe it. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. First of all, thank you to everybody who is subscribed to the YouTube channel. The numbers we put up post-Champions Classic were absolutely incredible. Thousands of you watched. I appreciate it. If you're new to the show, make sure that you are subscribed. You can also subscribe Apple, Spotify, etc. Also, make sure on YouTube, come back at 6 p.m. tonight. We will be running producer Matt's clip from Atlanta. He was in Atlanta for the Champions Classic and put together a great video montage from on site. It was absolutely incredible. Got a chance to check it out this morning. So make sure you come back here at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And again, you can listen and download on Apple, Spotify, etc. Really quickly, also, before we get started, I do want to welcome back our partners, our friends. I'm talking Callie Puffs and CalliePuffs.com. Okay, so I just mentioned it. It's that time of year. Football's overlapping with basketball. You're on the couch all day Thursday night for NFL, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, Monday night. Now Tuesday, we got great college basketball. You want a snack that is healthy but also delicious. That is where Callie Puffs comes in. Okay, so Callie Puffs is the alternative to all the crap in your grocery aisle. Started by a guy no different than you and I. His name's Joey. He's a guy that I've gotten to know and I respect and I like. Basically was sitting there on the couch one day saying there has to be a better snack for me to eat while I'm gorging on football all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And there's got to be a snack that my kids will like as well. That's how he came up with Callie Puffs. Baked, not fried, healthy ingredients, no grease, no oil, whatever, avocado oil instead of grease, all that good stuff. But here's the best part. They are absolutely delicious. We have them in the house here at the Torres house. They're fantastic. They're delicious, but they are also healthy as well. I've told you for a while now, don't even take my word for it. Try them out for yourself. You can learn more and get your first pack at CalliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. Oh, by the way, also worth noting, you can get them on Amazon.com as well. So you're on Amazon, you're buying God knows what, you're buying dog food and this and that and whatever. Throw some Callie Puffs into your cart. You're going to like them. I promise. Some of you have been nice enough to reach out, say that you've tried them and you really like them. So I appreciate everybody's support. Again, CalliePuffs.com is where you can learn more and also available at Amazon. All right, so we got ourselves a busy show. We're covering a lot of ground. We're going to be getting to college hoops in a minute. But with that said, there is no more time to waste. Let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, listen, I just said we're going to talk college hoops in a minute, okay? And Tuesday night, we did full reaction to Champions Classic. And I didn't really talk college football playoff stuff And listen, what I am not going to do over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes, whatever it ends up being, I'm not going to give my takes on, well, this team shouldn't be ranked here. And why is that team ranked there? And what are we doing with this team ranked there? You've heard everybody's takes. That was 24, 36, 48, 72 hours ago, whenever you're listening to this. And so what I don't want to do is just give takes on what the committee did wrong. What I have realized, however, is this, is that as we get deeper into these college football playoff rankings, what I have come to realize is that I believe that we are set to have a very disappointing first college football playoff race, not because some of the teams aren't good, not because the bracket won't be fun when it's filled out, but because really there is one thing going on in college football that I don't think any of us fully realized, any of us fully accounted for. And here is what is going to happen once we get that college football playoff bracket. It's basically impossible to know who the 12 best teams actually are, and that's taking aside all the automatic bids for the Group of Five, ACC, Big 12, etc. But I also believe that we are in a scenario where big brand bias could hurt the college football playoff. And ultimately, like I said, I just don't believe that we're going to get the 12 best teams, and I believe that it is going to leave fans completely unsatisfied. And so I know what some of you are thinking, Torres, we still got 3 weeks left in the regular season. How can you go there? There are so many things that have yet to be determined. That is true. What I would also say is we only have 3 weeks left in the regular season. And so when you look, let's just look at the first version of, or the most recent version of the college football playoff rankings, okay? Oregon's number one. I don't think any of us are going to argue that. Oregon and Indiana, the only two teams in the Power Five, and BYU as well. But Oregon, only two teams, SEC, Big Ten, Oregon, Indiana are the only two undefeated teams, okay? They have that great win over Ohio State. Nobody's arguing Oregon. I don't really think anybody's arguing Ohio State either. Ohio State's number two. Their only loss last second to Oregon. If there's not the Jeremiah Smith pass interference, maybe all of a sudden they beat Oregon. They're in field goal range. Okay. Then you get to three. Texas. Well, Texas, they're awesome. I mean, they're the SEC. They're amazing. Who's Texas's best win? Right now, it's Vanderbilt. The only team that they've played currently in the top 25 is Georgia, and they got absolutely destroyed by Georgia at home. Oh, by the way, number four, Penn State. You know how many wins they have over the current top 25? Yeah, 0. They have not beaten a single top 25 team, just like Texas has not beaten a top 25 team. And oh, by the way, just like the number 5 ranked team in these playoffs, Indiana right now has not beaten a team in the rankings as well. And so the second that playoff bracket came out on Tuesday, you know what it immediately turned into? Like, you know how we used to have fights all the time about the 4 spot versus the 5 spot? And everybody was convinced there's no way that once we get to a 12-team playoff, you're going to be able to argue that about the 13th team deserving to be in over the 12th team. Well, I actually find it to be the exact opposite, because the second the bracket came out, all I heard was if Indiana loses to Ohio State, they have 0 good wins. Penn State, how could they be the 4th ranked team? They have 0 good wins and are going to finish the regular season without a top 25 victory. What about Texas? What about this school? What about, and then, oh, by the way, you also see the scenarios potentially playing out where if Tennessee loses to Georgia this weekend, what do you do with Georgia versus Tennessee versus Alabama that have played each other? So I could go on and on, but this playoff that was supposed to solve everything, I actually think has created way more problems. And I think there is an underlying problem that I don't think any of us fully realized when we decided to go to 12 teams, and really when we decided to shake up college sports the way that we have over the last couple years. Because at the end of the day, the issue with the 12-team playoff, you know what it is? It's not the 12-team playoff. It is not the expanded playoff. It is the expansion of all of these power conferences. And what I don't think any of us realized was how imbalanced schedules were going to end up and how much chaos it would cause because of it. Now, listen, I remember in the preseason talking about, okay, you really have to look at schedules more than ever before. And you looked at a team like Texas A&M that didn't play Alabama, that didn't play Georgia. You said, okay, I could see the pathway. Ole Miss, that was why so many people liked them in the preseason. But I bring it up because as time has gone on, I don't think I realized how imbalanced schedules are causing complete chaos and really giving us no perspective on how good these teams are. All you got to do is look at all of these top conferences. Let's just go with the ACC. And I'll be quick. We don't have to spend much time. It's the ACC, whatever. 3 teams have clearly separated themselves in the ACC. Miami, SMU, and Clemson, okay? Miami, SMU, Clemson, all 3 of them either have 0 or 1 losses in league play. Well, guess what? None of them play each other. By the way, you know who's right behind those 2 teams in the standing, or those 3 teams in the standings? Louisville, who has played all 3 of them, okay? So Louisville, in theory, could be as good or better than some of the teams, but it's like, but they didn't get the schedule breaks that SMU got, that Miami got, that Clemson got. Big 12, it's kind of the same. BYU alone in first place. Colorado alone in second place. They don't play each other this year. By the way, Iowa State was in first place until last week. They don't play Colorado or BYU. Kansas State, who's tied with Iowa State for second place, plays Iowa State, Colorado, and BYU. By the way, the Big Ten. Listen, I'll say this. I'm not a Ryan Day guy. I don't trust the guy. I wouldn't say I don't like him. I'm sure he's a wonderful human being. But look at Ohio State's schedule versus the rest of the contenders in the Big Ten. Ohio State has to play Penn State, Oregon, and Indiana. Did you realize Indiana, Oregon, and Penn State don't play each other at all? And so if Ohio State takes a second, like, how are we judging this all based on? And that is the core of the problem, is that these imbalanced schedules have just created so much uncertainty, even atop these leagues. And so as I'm starting to project ahead to this college football playoff, there's a couple things a couple things are going to happen. One, either really good teams are going to be left out. So we're talking about an 11-1 Indiana. I can't imagine an 11-1 Penn State. But 2, just stay in the SEC. Think about the SEC. And I know I'm going in a lot of different directions, but I am just trying to tell you about a problem that is inevitably going to be coming up here in the next few weeks. Look at the SEC. You know, there is a very likely scenario we have a 6-way tie atop the SEC. This is all that has to happen for there to be a 6-way tie atop the SEC. What is it? It is Georgia beating Tennessee this weekend. Very well could happen. Missouri winning out. Could happen. Actually, this is what would happen. Texas A&M, the winner. Let's assume everybody else wins. Texas A&M, Texas, the winner would have 1 loss. Everybody else would have 2. But whoever loses that game, if Georgia beats Tennessee, that means if Alabama wins out, Ole Miss wins out, Missouri wins out, you're talking about a very likely scenario where we have a 6-way tie in second place. Even if Missouri loses South Carolina, we could have a 5-way tie in second place. And so just think about what that college football playoff picture would look like if that happens. Think about all the different scenarios we're going to have to factor in. Just think about, how about this? Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama. Tennessee beat Alabama. Alabama beat Georgia. If Georgia beats Tennessee this weekend and they're a double-digit favorite, we will get to those picks in a minute. All of a sudden, what do you do with those 3 teams? I'm already seeing the argument of, Alabama should be in over Tennessee because of this, because of that. And Tennessee fans like, we beat them on the field. And we're going to be punished because our starting quarterback isn't going to play against Georgia? Ole Miss, I think there's a scenario where Ole Miss, if they're 10-2, they got that really bad loss to Kentucky. I could see the world where Georgia gets in over Ole Miss. How about this, which I don't think anybody has taken the time to think about at this point? SEC championship game. Let's say the winner of Texas A&M gets in with 1 loss, okay? Let's say the winner of Texas A&M gets in with 1 loss. Let's say the loser, let's say the second team that gets in is going to have 2 losses. Let's say it's Georgia. Let's just say for the sake of argument it ends up being Georgia, okay? What if Georgia loses to Texas A&M? What if Georgia loses to Texas? What if Georgia loses in the SEC championship game and they have a 3rd loss? Are you going to punish them for making the SEC championship game? But if you put them in because of a tie break, are you going to put them into a 12-team playoff over Ole Miss, who they lost to, over Alabama? The point I'm trying to make, and we could get off this topic because I don't know if I'm just throwing a bunch of teams and scenarios at you and it's even making sense. I don't think this college football playoff is going to give us the closure and certainty that we assumed would happen when we went to 12 teams. Again, when we went to 12 teams, I think we all thought, oh my goodness, everything's going to get figured out. And if you don't make that 12-team playoff, you're going to have no argument. Well, now I could keep going with scenarios, but a three-loss SEC runner-up versus a 2-loss team that doesn't go to the SEC championship game. What do you do there? Teams that have beaten each other head-to-head. What do you do there? By the way, How about a team like BYU? If BYU runs the table and they lose in the Big 12 championship game, here's the thing. They will have a more impressive resume than a team like, I don't know, Indiana, a team like Georgia, but I don't know. I can't think of everybody off the top of my head. Let's say Texas. If Texas loses to Texas A&M, BYU will have a more impressive resume than Texas. We would all agree Texas looks better. And so think about all of the things that could come into play. 3-loss SEC runner-up versus 2-loss team. Brand bias. Tennessee loses to Alabama, but Alabama gets in ahead of them. How about again, I'm rambling. It's too early in the show for me to be rambling. The point I'm trying to make, I think we all thought this 12-team college football playoff was going to solve everything. I think all it's going to do is cause more questions, cause more chaos. Here's my prediction, is that the second that bracket gets announced, we're going to start talking about expanding this thing because there are going to be good teams left out. It is inevitable. There aren't enough weeks. There aren't enough losses to be had. I'm here to tell you it's coming. All right. A little bit of a opening segment that was all over the place, but I had to get that off my chest. That's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we come back, how about this? College football. Are we about to have our first $10 million quarterback in college football? We'll talk about that. Then we got to talk about some college hoops. Champions Classic. Time to blow it up. Calipari says his team isn't good. What do we make of that? Oh, by the way, Dick Vitale calling some people out. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more. All available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. More Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions. All right, everybody. Hi, back. Good to be back. So first of all, chat is humming. Appreciate everybody chiming in and tuning in here on a Thursday afternoon. I already see one person asking about Arkansas slow starts. We're going to get to all that, the basketball side of things in a minute. But what I do want to do very quickly, I do want to give a very interesting follow-up to a very fascinating story that we have talked about a few times here on the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. So about 2-3 weeks ago, we really started talking about the recruitment of the number one quarterback in America, Bryce Underwood. He's from Michigan, and really just a fascinating story, okay? And we don't talk a ton of football recruiting on this channel because I just don't think that really outside of a couple, like you get a 4-star running back, a 5-star offensive tackle. It just, football is about the totality of players, and are you building a bench and building depth and building whatever? But when it comes to a 5-star quarterback, there is no doubt one guy can completely change the program. Now, listen, look at college football right now. DJ Lagway basically just saved Billy Napier's job, okay? You go on and on down the list. Cam Ward, I know he's not a high school player, but he's a transfer. He changed the entire Miami program. So one quarterback can change a program, and we are talking about Bryce Underwood now, the number one quarterback in America, who one school believes will change their program and another school hopes will change theirs, okay? So this kid is from Michigan, And what's interesting about his recruitment, we talked about it probably about 2 weeks ago. So he is from Michigan, but about a year ago, it was right at the beginning of the 2024 calendar year. So we're talking 10 plus months ago. Commits to LSU. Chooses them over the home state school, Michigan. Michigan, by the way, was coming off of a national championship run, but there was uncertainty about Jim Harbaugh, et cetera, et cetera. Want to say Colorado was maybe in the mix as well. Well, I bring it up because the kid commits to LSU, and we really didn't even think about it until about 2 weeks ago. And that was because there was a report that Michigan, in desperate need of some quarterback upgrades, was willing to go all in on NIL with this kid. We talked about it at the time. Michigan has not been a program that has really kind of quote unquote bought teams. They've kind of used their NIL resources to take care of guys currently on the roster. But as the program struggled, you started to see reports they're going to do what it takes to at least make things interesting with this kid. And as of about 2 weeks ago, the conversation was, are they going to give him about $5 million, about $1 to $1.5 million a year for 4 years? Could they do that? Could they put out that money? And would it sway this kid to go to Michigan? Well, I bring it up because on Thursday, right before we got ready to go on air, we get another report. And how about this? There is a report from On3's Michigan site. You can see it on the screen if you're watching on YouTube right now. Michigan is prepared to offer LSU five-star QB commit Bryce Underwood $10.5 million over 4 years, according to the Wolverine on 3. And so here is the $10 million question. Are we about to have our first 8-figure quarterback in college football? It sure does feel like it's coming. The big question is it going to be at LSU or is it going to be at Michigan? Now let's talk about this from all perspectives. And listen, from the Michigan side of things, to me, I said it a few weeks ago, it's surprising, but it's not. It's surprising because we just said it a minute ago. The bottom line is that historically, Michigan has not allocated much, if any, NIL resources to freshmen who haven't played in the program. Pretty straightforward, right? You win a national championship last year, and Harbaugh's stance always was, listen, how am I going to pay some kid who's never worn, the Michigan uniform money that Blake Corum isn't getting, that J.J. McCarthy isn't getting, that all those guys on last year's team weren't getting? But times change, things have changed, and what I will say is things are starting to get a little bit desperate at Michigan. Listen, we all watch these games. We all know. Here's the crazy part. Michigan isn't even that bad. The defense played very well the other day against Indiana. The run game probably would be okay, but they have zero passing game. And so I don't think Michigan is a terrible program all of a sudden. I just think they have truly horrific quarterback play. Currently ranked, by the way, 130th out of 134 FBS teams, worst among power conferences. Yes, they have a worse passing attack than Iowa. Yes, they have a worse passing attack than Purdue, than whoever. Pick the worst ones you can think of. Florida State, who doesn't have a quarterback, I don't think. Michigan's worse than all of them. And so desperate times call for desperate measures. And this is exactly what this thing is. And I would add that it reminds me a lot of what we saw last year with Dylan Raiola. Remember, Nebraska's coming off a 5-7 year. They haven't made a bowl game in forever. Matt Rule has no real plan at quarterback. And I think he really kind of looked around and said, we cannot go into year 2 without a better answer at quarterback. And so they make the move on Dylan Raiola, was the number 1, number 2 quarterback in America, was committed to Georgia. He flips to Nebraska. His dad played in Nebraska. We know that story. But Matt Rule was basically like, we have to do something. We cannot go into next season with the quarterback situation we have. I think it's also worth noting, if you remember, this is kind of what happened with Steve Sarkisian as well. If you remember, year 1 goes 5-7, struggles. They lose a couple weird games. Going into year 2, he doesn't have an answer. Quinn Ewers hits the portal, and I said right away on this show, I said, Quinn Ewers is going to be your Texas starting quarterback before he even committed to Texas. I said, Texas needs this kid. This kid needs Texas, and he's been the starting quarterback since. So Michigan is desperate. I'm not surprised. I believe the NIL dollar amount. I think the more interesting conversation is, can LSU fight off Michigan to keep this kid? Now, what I would say is this. If you're an LSU fan, one, you're probably not very happy with Brian Kelly. And I think that's actually the more interesting conversation. Like, I think there's 2 very interesting sides of this coin. What does it mean for the Michigan program if they actually were to flip them? Because again, I think they're a pretty decent quarterback play away from, I'm not saying they're Oregon or Ohio State this year, but they would have beaten Indiana last week. They would have beaten Washington a few weeks ago. So they don't need, Peyton Manning in his prime. They just don't need, for lack of a better term, Cooper Manning in his prime. Like they just need a little bit of an upgrade and they're right there. But the more interesting side to me, what would it mean for LSU? If LSU were to lose this guy, Brian Kelly right now, I don't think people realize fans in Baton Rouge I think they're just out on Brian Kelly. And I'm not saying that means he's going to get fired. That's not what that's saying. But what it is saying is they need a reason to believe that this guy knows what he's doing and that he can handle life in the SEC. And if he were to lose a 5-star quarterback, I think you start to sit there and say the walls are closing in on that guy. I don't know what fans have to be excited about. Now, if you're an LSU fan, and let's get to whether I actually think this is going to happen or not, because I'll be transparent. I think this makes for great YouTube content, podcast content, Twitter content. I don't think they're going to lose him. And I'll just say, I think that right now, National Signing Day is about 3 weeks away. So basically, LSU's got to get to the finish line for 3 more weeks. But I don't think LSU is going to lose him for a couple reasons. One, first of all, I'll say this. I'll give the kid a little bit of credit. There's a lot of noise around this. And listen, Michigan fans are going to do what they have to do to help their program get back on top of college football. But the kid, to his credit, has given no real indication that he's going anywhere other than LSU. First off, there was he played in a state playoff game a few weeks ago. There were pictures of him after the game signing LSU helmets, signing LSU jerseys. He was wearing LSU gear after the game. By the way, thought it was interesting. Michigan played Oregon at home that week. There was a lot of speculation a few weekends ago. Would he be in attendance? There was one fan that snapped a picture, said, Bryce Underwood's here. Then it's like, no, that actually wasn't Bryce Underwood. So his parents were there, but Bryce Underwood wasn't. And to his credit, he didn't show up to a Michigan game when they hosted the number 1 team in the country. But you know where he was last week? He was at LSU. LSU hosted Bama. It wasn't pretty. LSU gets embarrassed. But I bring it up because he is saying and doing all the right things right now. Like I said, traveled to Baton Rouge in the midst of all this, did not go to Michigan when they were hosting the number 1 team in the country. And so, like I said, I think this makes for great social media fodder, great Twitter fodder, great whatever. I just don't know that it's going to ultimately change anything in his recruitment. Bottom line is, until there's some actual indication from him that he is not going to be an LSU Tiger, I wouldn't freak out. And I think the other thing too is it's not like LSU doesn't have the money to match whatever Michigan does, right? Now, maybe they just decide, you know what, we're not going to do that. Doesn't sound like LSU to me. LSU feels like if they need to raise $10 million to keep this kid, they'll raise it. If they need to raise $20 million to keep it, they'll do it. It's like there are certain programs that whatever it takes to win at the highest level, they're going to do that. Also think it's worth noting, by the way, there's a little bit off of the collectives because we believe we're going to get revenue sharing next season. So the schools will be able to pay players directly. Now, in my opinion, that money is going to go more to kind of like a quote unquote base salary. And then from there, the collective can pay on top of that. And maybe that's where the money comes from. So maybe it won't all have to come from LSU. But to me, 2, 2.5, 3, whatever it's going to take is like, you got to figure out a way if you're LSU to keep them. Because as interesting as the story is, what would it mean for LSU? I think the counter to that would be, what would it mean for Michigan if they were to lose them? Or what would it mean for Michigan if they were to get them? What would it mean for LSU if they were to lose them? I could go on, but until I see something from the kid that makes me feel like he is not going to be at at LSU next year, I'm tripping it up on my own. I believe he'll be an LSU Tiger. But again, we're about 3 weeks till National Signing Day. It is December 6th, I believe. And man, oh man, what a fun, interesting conversation this is going to be. All right, really quickly, on our Thursday show, we always do our Saturday college football picks. I'll be transparent. This week, a little tough to pick these games. Okay, first of all, we got a bunch of teams that are on buys and this and that late in the year, but like injuries have just ravaged these games. You look at Florida, LSU, DJ Lagway, we don't know if he's going to play. You look at, whatever. And by the way, it's worth noting, like Alabama's playing Mercer. There's just not a lot of really big games. Do have a couple picks, though. We'll be quick. As always, the picks will be posted Friday morning, AaronTorresOnline.com. Follow the Instagram page, Aaron Torres Pod. And we do have our college football betting show, which we're doing a little bit later this week, hoping for some injury updates. But speaking of injuries, listen, big game. It's so disappointing, and I feel bad for Tennessee fans. Tennessee going to Georgia. And right now, listen, Josh Heupel said, trust the availability report. Nico's been whatever. But the big story is Nico available? Is he healthy? I saw Chris Felica, of all people, said, I was talking to people at Tennessee. He's not playing. I don't know how good Chris Felica's sources are in Knoxville, but the betting market reflects that Tennessee is not going to have Nico Imamalieva available. Georgia open is like an 8.5, 9-point favorite. It is up to 10.5. The over-under is 47.5. I actually think there is actually a very good bet in this game, and I think it's the under, because I don't think people realize how good Tennessee is, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Yes, they're potentially playing with a backup quarterback. Doesn't change the fact that Tim Banks has this team rolling at the highest level, operating at the highest level. And the crazy thing about Tennessee, in all of their SEC games this year, this is kind of crazy. They haven't had a single game hit 48 total points. So obviously to go over, you'd have to have 48 or more points. Tennessee, look at the scores of their SEC games. They've been close. They've been low scoring. Listen, you go back to Oklahoma, 25-15 final score there. That's 40 points. 19-14 lost to Arkansas. 23-17 lost win over Florida in overtime. That's 40 points. 24-17 Alabama. That's 41 points. Kentucky under 48. And of course, Mississippi State a week ago hits 47. So I bring it up because I think this Tennessee defense, for all the talk about Nico, this defense will keep them in it. You wish Nico was playing, because I think that was a game that they felt like they could win outright. They still might be able to, because Carson Beck stinks. But go ahead, give me Tennessee. Give me the under in this game of 47.5. If Nico was playing and I knew for sure, might take him outright, but I like Tennessee, or I like the under in this game. Really quickly, let's get to the next one. Producer Matt, I'll be honest, I forget what order I gave you, so just put the next graphic on the screen and we'll roll from there. Okay, we'll go a little old Southwest Classic, not Southwest Classic, that's Texas A&M and Arkansas, but this is the old Southwest Conference rivalry. Texas at Arkansas. Texas a 13.5-point favorite. The over-under set at 57.5. Arkansas fans, hate to say it, I think Texas wins. I think Texas covers the 13.5. Bottom line is, first of all, it's not like you can't go into Razorback Stadium and win this year. LSU, basically the only good game they've played all season long. They destroyed Arkansas at Arkansas. Ole Miss destroyed Arkansas at Arkansas. And beyond that, I just think it's kind of a bad matchup. Texas has one of the best pass offenses in college football. Arkansas secondary is by far their weakness. We saw Jackson Dart absolutely expose them a few weeks ago. And I think Quinn Ewers is operating at a really high level with this offense. We saw them against Florida a few weeks ago. And I just think the Arkansas, the vibes are just weird around that program right now. There's the report that Sam Pittman's staying, but they haven't played well of late, but they're coming off a bye. But what should we expect? But I think Texas goes in. I think this has 34-14 written all over it. I think they win. I think they cover. Remember, Texas has so much at stake. I think we get a good effort from them. The other thing, too, Sark talked about how crazy that atmosphere was a couple years ago when they played in Fayetteville. Hate to say it, Arkansas fans, doesn't feel like the vibes are going to be the same for an 11 a.m. local time kickoff. If I'm wrong, tell me. But I think Texas wins. I think Texas covers. Let's get to the next game. Is it the Colorado game, or is it the what's the other game I gave? Okay, so Colorado and Utah. Colorado, an 11.5-point favorite, over under set at 46.5. What's interesting about this game, first of all, big noon kickoff. So you know how I just said it's an 11 a.m. kickoff in Fayetteville? How about the 10 a.m. local time start in Boulder, Colorado? But here is my pick for this game. So Colorado has been one of our favorite picks and favorite bets all season long, okay? I said about week 5, I said I think Vegas is completely undervaluing this team. We took them against, we took the over in Central Florida. We ended up hitting on that. We took them against Kansas State plus the points, covered there. Took them plus the points against Arizona, wasn't even close. Took them as a small road favorite, and they took care of business against Texas Tech. This week, we're actually going to stay away from the point total. It feels like Vegas is finally, they've taken it over the head enough, giving the bad lines out on Colorado. This is another game where I do like the under, though, of 46.5. Now, I know what you'll say. You'll say, how can you 46.5? That is way too low. That number is not right, Torres. What I would say to that is pretty straightforward, right? Is if you look at Utah, it's been a disappointing season, but it's been a disappointing season because Cam Rising got hurt and they didn't have a backup quarterback. So when you look at Utah's losses, they're on a 5-game losing streak. They haven't given up more than 27 points in any of those games. So Colorado is, as good as that offense is, they're not just going to be able to move the ball up and down the field. This is the best pass defense that Colorado's faced all year. And then when Utah has the ball, let's give Colorado some credit. They have a very good defense that is one of the most improved defenses in college football this year. They're like at 65th nationally in total defense, which is improved from like 130th a year ago. So I like Colorado to win, Colorado to cover. Really quickly, the only other game that I think is worth noting is Wisconsin hosting Oregon. Oregon is a 14.5-point favorite. Listen, it might feel stupid to bet against Dan Lanning in Oregon. I actually do like Wisconsin plus the 14.5. And really, to me, what this game is about, it's a situational play. You know, in this year where we have two bye weeks, Oregon, this will be the 8th straight week that they have played. So they had their bye week in like mid-September. They're straight through, and this is their 3rd cross-country trip since the bye. They beat Ohio State, then they have to fly to Purdue. They come back and they play whoever it was, Illinois. Then they got to fly back to Michigan. Then they fly back and take care of business last week, and now they're flying back again across country to Wisconsin. Wisconsin is off a bye. Wisconsin is fresh. I think Oregon wins, but I think it's an ugly 27-17 type game. The other thing worth noting, Wisconsin's pass defense is pretty good. They should be able to slow down Dylan Gabriel. So give me Wisconsin plus the points. All right, producer Matt, I'll tell you what, let's take one more quick break. We'll come back. We will get to college hoops because there are 3 topics I want to get to. One, people are ready to boot Michigan State out of the Champions Classic. We're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss John Calipari. He seems a little worried about Arkansas. Should we be? And then we'll talk about how about Dick Vitale out of nowhere just coming after Kentucky fans. One more quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions. All right, everybody. I'm back. Gonna be back. So do want to go ahead and switch gears, talk a little bit of college hoops. Listen, it's a really fun time of year. I can't speak for anybody else, but I love the college football, college basketball crossover time. And listen, Tuesday night was the night that it felt like college basketball is back, baby. That's right. Champions Classic was played. Atlanta, by the way, if you're watching live, and even if you're not watching live, reminder, producer Matt was in Atlanta. He put together a little video montage of the night. It is available at the Aaron Torres YouTube channel. It will be available on Thursday night, so make sure to go back and check it out. But what I want to talk about is the Champions Classic, and if it's time to think about maybe shaking it up just a little bit, okay? And that's because if you watch the games, 2 things stood out. Kentucky Duke was everything great about college basketball. 2 huge brands. filled arena. It's loud. People are into it. Two exciting young coaches. By the way, Kentucky, super well coached. We can all see it with our eyes. Duke with those NBA players. Cooper. Oh, it felt so good, baby. Then we had the first game. Well, very good. Kansas beat Michigan State. I'll be real. Kansas had a great game from Hunter Dickinson. Kansas, I think, is pretty good. They're not even playing that well right now. Michigan State, I don't really remember a single thing that they did that had me like excited about them as a team and like as a team that I want to watch. Like Kansas didn't look great, but you can see the pieces are there. They're really exciting. And you watch Michigan State and you just say, I don't really know if they're all that exciting. And so I bring it up because as the games were unfolding, an interesting little narrative popped up on social media that I think is worth diving into here. And that narrative is pretty straightforward. Is it time to boot Michigan State from the Champions Classic? And as specifically, is it also time to maybe bring in UConn to replace him? Thought it was interesting. You know, a guy that I've criticized a lot through the years, put out a pretty interesting column on Wednesday morning. Dan Wolkin, USA Today. Didn't agree with a lot of his COVID takes, but that's another conversation from 5 years ago that we don't have to get into. But he put out a column. This is his tweet. He said, column from last night. If college basketball is going to have an event called the Champions Classic, it might be a good idea to have teams that actually win championships. Time to boot Michigan State for UConn. I'll also add, I think Dan Wetzel, I don't know if he wrote a column, but Dan Wetzel, I remember seeing this on Tuesday night. He did have a tweet. It says, how many more national titles does UConn have to win to get into the Champions Classic? Question mark. And so it's an interesting conversation. It's the end of the week, and I'm here to say something very simple. On this show, and I've said this before, I always like to say, we talk about several different types of stories. We talk about what did happen, what will happen, what could happen, and what should happen even if it won't. And let's go ahead and put the Torres stamp of approval on booting Michigan State from the Champions Classic and replacing them with UConn. By the way, I also saw John Rothstein put out an argument for adding a third game to that. We'll get to that in a minute. But let me just explain baseline why I actually agree with the sentiment that UConn should be in this event. And it's not because, Torres is a UConn guy. Here's the bottom line. To me, listen, I love college hoops, right? I think if you're watching this channel, if you're watching this show, if you're watching this clip, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you love college basketball too. But I'll say this, even as a college basketball fan, the season kind of creeps up on you. You don't really know oh my goodness, it's here. We're playing exhibitions. We're playing games. And the Champions Classic has always been the unofficial launch of college basketball season. It used to actually be the season opening day. They have changed that. But I bring it up because college basketball, it's so easy to get lost in the weeds. Has it started? Is this an exhibition? Does it count? Whatever. And so the Champions Classic has now become the unofficial launch of the college basketball season. And so when I think about putting college basketball's best foot forward, what stands out, Michigan State ain't it, right? Like you go back and you look, first of all, Michigan State hasn't even been good in this event. I went back and looked it up. Their last 9 games in this event, Michigan State is 2-7. One of the wins was during COVID when there was no crowds, so I don't even count that. Played in an empty arena, whatever. And then, oh, by the way, the other one was against one of Calipari's worst teams at Kentucky a few years ago. So it's not like they're even playing well in the event. But to me, what it really comes down to, this is supposed to be a signature moment in college basketball's kind of unofficial launch party, right? The moment where we put our best foot forward as a sport and we say, look, we know you love the NFL. We know you love your college football program, but don't forget that we started and we got a pretty darn good product too. And I think to the credit of Kansas, they have lived up to that end of the bargain. Duke, we talked about it on Tuesday night show. They ended up losing. That is a good basketball team. They always have NBA dudes. They're a fun watch. I'm sorry if I'm saying too many nice things about Duke, but it's true. Kentucky, we know what's happened there, but what I also know is Mark Pope's the right guy. They're going to play a fun brand. They're going to have NBA players as we go forward. They're going to always be there. Michigan State's kind of the outlier. And so to me, if we are putting our best foot forward in college basketball, Let's put our best brands and let's put our best programs. And there is no doubt in my mind that UConn is that right now. They're not only the two-time defending champ, they're dominating. They have NBA players. I mean, Donovan Clingan, by the way, went for 17, 13, and 8 the other night against the Portland Trail Blazers, okay? So UConn's got NBA players. They play a fun style. They're part of the college basketball discourse all season long. And not just when they win national championships. Like, whether UConn three-peats or not, they are a story. They do matter. They are a brand that people care about. I'd say this. Dan Hurley right now, I guess Calipari is still maybe the face of college basketball if you think about it. But Dan Hurley's kind of like the guy right now, right? Like Dan Hurley goes on Pat McAfee's show all the time. I'm sorry, but with due respect to John Shire or whoever, Dan Hurley's the only guy that's on Pat McAfee. He's really the only college basketball coach that's on him with Colin Cowherd. I mean, he is the front-facing person in this sport right now as John Calipari gets older, as Mark Few gets older, as Jay Wright retires, as Coach K retires, whatever. And so to me, if we're putting college basketball's best foot forward, if we care about this sport and we care about getting people interested, put the best teams with the best players and the biggest brands, and I'm sorry, Michigan State ain't it. Now, a couple other quick thoughts. One, like I said, we talk about what should happen, even if it won't. I understand. They just announced an extension of the Champions Classic. It is going to run through 2028, meaning these 4 teams are going to be in this event here for the next 4 years at minimum. So I get that it's not going anywhere. I mentioned earlier, I saw John Rothstein put out the argument, add a third game. Very rarely do I disagree with John Rothstein on college. I don't think a third game in one night is the answer. The event started at 6:30. It was tough for people to even get to the arena. As you saw, it was a completely empty arena. Now what are we going to do? Start at 2 p.m.? I don't buy it. By the way, the last game ended at like 11:30, 12 o'clock Eastern time. Again, we want people watching our sport, consuming our sport, etc. And so to me, the answer is just boot Michigan State, add UConn, or how about this? I thought about this. For you old school college basketball fans, do you remember an event called the DirecTV Grade 8 Festival? I might be the only person in America that remembers it, okay? When I was a kid, what they would do is they would put together a 2-night event where the previous year's Elite 8 would get together, right? So if it was UConn, Duke, Kentucky, Alabama, whoever, it doesn't really matter. And it was basically essentially the 8 best teams from the year before playing to essentially open the season. If we're going to add one game, let's just add 2, because that Tuesday, Wednesday window, it's a little bit quieter in the sports world. I think ESPN, I guess, technically has the NBA contract, whatever. I'd rather add 2 games and make the Champions Classic a 2-night event than a 1-night event. Maybe that's not possible. I don't really know. Whatever. It's just a thought, but I'll say this. Michigan State's getting tougher and tougher to watch. They look like a boring Big Ten school. They haven't even been competitive in that league. We talked about it on, I guess it was Tuesday night after the 2 games, where it's like Michigan State has finished in the top 4 once in the last 4 years in the Big Ten, made 1 Sweet 16. They're not very good. Anyway, there's other college hoop stuff to talk about. So we'll close by saying this. Yeah, I do think that it's time to boot Michigan State and put UConn in the Champions Classic. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about a game that happened on Wednesday night. It was Arkansas hosting Troy. Normally, I wouldn't talk about Arkansas versus Troy unless Arkansas lost. And thankfully, Arkansas did not lose that game. The final score in this one wasn't really reflective of the game itself. Final score was 65-49. Big story in this. There are really 2 big stories. One, why it was not reflective of the game itself is that Arkansas trailed at the half. Arkansas was down in this game 27-26 at the half. And the other big story is that Big Z went bonkers in the second half, okay? He finished the game with 19 points off the bench, 6 3-pointers, 5 blocks, 3 steals. I believe I saw a stat. He's the first player in college basketball history with a game where he had 6 threes, 5 blocks, and 3 steals. But I bring it up because despite the Big Z heroics wearing his headband, it was not a pretty performance. And this is really now 3 straight games to open the season where Arkansas has not looked great out of the gates. And a lot of people are asking, is it time to worry about this team? Now, I want to get into my personal opinion, but it is worth noting. It's not just my opinion on how worried Arkansas fans should be or how worried college or how worried whatever. But John Calipari had some very interesting things to say about how he feels about his team right now. Producer Matt, go ahead and play John Calipari after the 65-49 win against Troy.
I was not in a good place in the locker room after the game. And the reason is I need to teach these guys how to win and how to finish games. You don't come down and throw a lob pass out of bounds and throw a deep pass out of bounds and shoot a quick three with 2 minutes to go, drive the wrong way. We're running offense. You dribble the ball out of bounds. Why'd you do that? Well, I was trying to, whoa. In no uncertain terms, I let them know that ain't happening. Because in an SEC game, it's an 8-point game. You lose the game in 2 minutes because you do your own thing. You play to win. That means massage the clock, score at the buzzer, shot clock, and what's their team do?
Great work, producer Matt, turning that around. I did not see that clip until about 10 minutes before we went live on air, so I appreciate producer Matt doing that. So let me say this. John Calipari himself says Arkansas and he himself are, quote, not in a very good place right now. So I am not one to disagree. Let me say this. As somebody who has followed John Calipari's career since the Memphis days, since the UMass days, I'm actually not as worried as people, as a lot of other people. But what I will also say is if you are frustrated, if you are disappointed with the start to this season, I don't blame you. And I do agree that I agree with John Calipari. They got to get some stuff cleaned up here before the games really start to matter. First off, let me say this. I know I've been a Calipari defender. I am a little bit disappointed with how this team has looked. And yes, I'm the guy that tweeted out after the Kansas exhibition game that this team has Final Four potential. And yes, I picked them to go to the Final Four. And yes, by the way, when it was halftime against Troy and Troy led 27-26, I was ready to be the guy that came on and led today's show talking about, did I make a huge mistake picking this team to go to the Final Four? So it is frustrating. It is disappointing. Let me also put a little bit of a glasses half full spin on it. One, you're 2-1. You expected to be 2-1 at this point. You hope to be 3-0. The Baylor game was there for the taking. You easily could have won that. You end up losing that game by 5, probably about 30, 45 minutes from the Baylor campus. And so I bring it up because, listen, if we're going to praise Duke after Duke easily could have and maybe should have beaten Kentucky on Tuesday night, and we're not going to say that Duke's season is over and the worst program ever, I'm not going to do the same with Arkansas either. And what I would also say is there are some positives and there are some really fixable things. I think that sometimes when you see results like this, and obviously, look, there's a lot of negativity around Calipari right now from a certain fan base. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I bring it up because there are positives and it is easy to lose the positives in what has been not the prettiest basketball so far. First of all, it's worth noting the defense has been very good for Arkansas. And so for everybody that's going to sit there and say, oh, Calipari's team's always stinking, they always this, they always that. Remember last year that at the previous stop for John Calipari, the offense was very good, but the defense was really bad, like historically bad. And had he stayed at the previous school, the big conversation was he has to hire a defensive coordinator, the defense has to get better, whatever. The one thing you cannot deny about this Arkansas team, give them a little bit of credit. They play really hard and they defend their butts off, okay? I mentioned Big Z with 5 blocks on Wednesday night in this win. Trevin Brazil, I think, has been playing his you-know-what off so far this season, leaves this game with an ankle injury. You hope he's okay. Also worth noting, by the way, as far as this game is concerned, Jonas Aidoo is nowhere close to 100%. Jonas Aidoo was one of the best big men in the SEC last year. You go back to Wednesday night, he played 4 minutes in this game, had a donuts across the board, 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 shots attempted. He's clearly not 100%. And so you think about what I just said. You have 3 big guys that are all, I believe, all SEC caliber. Trevin Brazil gets hurt, does not come back. Jonas Aidoo does not play at all. And he still hold Troy to 49 points. Now, it kind of helped because you had to play Big Z, but you hold Troy to 49 points with basically one big guy in this game. The defense has been good. The perimeter defense with what's his face with Boogie Fland has been really good. And I think also the other thing that stands out, the 3-point shooting we all know has been bad. They got dudes that can make 3-point shots that just aren't making them. Okay. And that's not even my opinion. How about this? John L. Davis, who himself was dealing with a preseason injury. John L. Davis shot 41% from 3 last year. Right now, John L. Davis is shooting 15% from the 3-point line this season, okay? And so for me, it is hard to sit here and say that they are incapable of shooting threes when, first of all, they did finish 10 of 23 on whatever it was, Wednesday night. And then on top of that, it's also worth noting that John L. Davis is going to hit threes. Boogie Fland has actually hit him at a higher clip than I think a lot of people realize. The threes are eventually going to fall. And when they do, all of a sudden, it's going to look like it did in the second half. And what I would also say is this, and I think this is important. And I know Big Blue Nation is going to disagree with me and they're going to yell at me and they're going to scream at me and whatever. You guys are entitled to do that. I whatever. But Calipari's teams always start slow. And it's not necessarily not by design. What I mean by that, I know that was like a quadruple negative. But Calipari has talked, and I thought he did he said something very eloquent over the summer, where over the summer, he's talking about his team and having the guys on campus. He said the summer and early part of practice is about making you into the best version of yourself. And it's a lot of individual work. It's a lot of this. It's a lot of that. And then as we get closer to the season, it's about the team stuff. It's about installing offense. It's about installing defense. It's about this. It's about that. It's about whatever. And so I only bring it up to very simply say that if you actually look at the results, this is a guy that over the years, his teams do get better. And I do think there is a little bit of they're a little loose. They're playing Troy. People aren't really locked in. But if you go ahead and just look at last year, because I know what everyone's going to say, oh, Kelly's past his prime is whatever. This was a guy at Kentucky who finished second in the SEC and who does know how to win games in this league. And let's remember that over the final month of the season, Tennessee won the SEC regular season title. Kentucky won at Tennessee. Auburn was the SEC tournament champs. Kentucky won at Auburn. Alabama made the Final Four. John Calipari's team destroyed Alabama. Who else? There's another one I'm missing somewhere along the way. Oh, they won at Budweiser Arena as well. And so I only bring it up to very simply say, I don't think it's time to panic. The talent is there. You would hope that they were further along. You would hope that they would perform better in these early season games. But as the Arkansas official basketball Twitter account tweeted out, a win is a win. They all count the same. And so you avoided the bad loss. I'm not yet worried. This team is going to get better. You certainly need to see improvement, but you need to see improvement from the team. I need to see improvement from certain players. I need to see improvement from Nelly Davis. I need to see Jonas Adu healthy. I'm going to pray that Trevin Brazil, there's nothing major. If there's an update and I missed it, I apologize, but I just bring it up. Torres ain't freaking out yet. Torres ain't freaking out yet. By the way, I do have a little bit of an update. I do see producer Matt has dropped in the chat. Caleb Wilson, 5-star, was supposed to visit Arkansas this weekend. He is not. That might be another standalone clip for another day. I think he's going to end up a Wildcat. All right, speaking of the Wildcat, I have one more thing to say. Got something to get off my chest. I cannot believe what Dick Vitale said on Thursday afternoon, okay? So here's the bottom line. Is that it was coming off of the Arkansas game. And we just talked about the Arkansas game. We don't need to relitigate it. It wasn't pretty. Troy was up 27-26 at halftime. It was hideous, okay? And listen, I think Arkansas is going to get better, whatever. But what ends up happening, every time Arkansas plays, it's 50% Arkansas fans either liking what they see or not liking what they see and talking about it. And then it's another 50% of Kentucky fans that feel the need to let everybody know how happy they are that the last coach isn't there and he stinks and he's this and he's that and he's whatever. Now listen, Kentucky fans, we're going to get into this. And I love you guys. You guys have been great to me. I appreciate everything that you do for me in this channel. And I sent producer Matt down to Atlanta to take in the Duke game with you. But at the same time, I will say this. I think some of the, watching of the other program, not my style, but it's not even not my style. Because guess what? Doesn't really matter what I think. We're not here to talk about what I think. We're here to talk about what Dick Vitale thinks. That's right. So Dick Vitale, this poor guy, I know he's going through some health issues. I wish him nothing but the best in a speedy recovery. But he is very clearly talking. He's very clearly watching college basketball. And he put out an interesting tweet that certainly got a lot of attention on Thursday morning. Here's what Dick Vitale tweeted. He said, a message to Cats fans that make comparisons after a big win by Coach Mark Pope with Coach Cal Arkansas is ridiculous. Coach Pope himself has applauded the Calipari achievements in his 15 years, and Cal praised the hiring of Mark. For 15 years, Cal gave his best to Kentucky basketball and BBN. Let's see. He did do a little follow-up. Oh, he did do a follow-up, which I'm now just seeing on his timeline. He said, so happy for Coach Pope and Kentucky basketball as the love from BBN is coming full force, the big W over Duke. Word of advice, to love your coach after a super W is awesome, baby, but also love him when they get an L. Genuine fans, this and that. Do want to focus on the first one, though, because Dick Vitale just basically said what I said about Kentucky fans, okay? And listen, be quick. Bottom line, I respect Kentucky fans. You guys have been great to me. I appreciate everything that you've done. But the Calipari stuff's got to stop, man. Listen, bottom line is, here's why, and I'll just say this, and I said this over the summer, that I don't understand why people have to take a joy in John Calipari having struggles or whatever. First of all, one, he's not your problem anymore. Whether he's right, whether he's wrong, whether he's good, whether he's bad, it doesn't really matter. He's not your problem. So focus on your team. As Dick Vitale said, you got a great young coach. I love Mark Pope. I think he's going to be awesome there. By the way, I've been saying since the roster came together in May, they're better than 23rd in the country. They're better than 8th in the SEC. We had Lamont Butler on the show. We talked about it, okay? But at the same time, one, appreciate your coach, enjoy your coach. Two, forget appreciating Cal, but we'll talk about that in a minute. The thing that I keep coming back to with Kentucky fans should be rooting for Cal. You know why? Because he did you a huge favor. I can't get over this, and I don't understand why I'm the only one that realizes this. You guys were, what do they say? Up, what's creek without a paddle? Schitt's Creek, and I'm not talking about the show with Eugene Levy. You were up Schitt's Creek without a paddle because you owed him, and I'm talking about the show, by the way, if there's kids in the car, so I apologize. But I'm saying this because you owed the guy what? You know the number, $35 million, whatever it was, to fire him. And you were in a spot where you had nothing to do and you didn't want this guy after last season. And so Calipari, thank him for the 15 years that he gave you, but thank him for allowing you to go out and spend the money that you did on Mark Pope, spend the money that you did in NIL, because at the end of the day, if Calipari didn't willingly leave for Arkansas, then guess what? You would be stuck with the same Calipari that you were desperate to get rid of. So he did you a favor. He left so that you didn't have to pay the buyout, so that you could hire Mark Pope, so that you could pay for all that NIL. And I'm not blaming, Kentucky for spending money on Mark Pope and NIL, but it's the truth. Beyond that, I do think that he did give you 15 great years. He did give you a national championship. And on top of it, he gave you 4 Final Fours? And it didn't end well, but that doesn't mean that there weren't great moments. And it doesn't mean, I don't even know. It doesn't mean that there weren't great moments. It doesn't mean, and the other thing too, really quickly, and I think Dick Vitale is right on this, he's been very supportive of this program. That's the other thing that stands out. So I knew there was another point I wanted to get to. Sorry, we've been on for well over an hour live here, so forgive me as I'm tripping over my own words here. But to his credit, remember, this was a guy that has said nothing but nice things, has praised Mark Pope. But here's the other thing. He's nothing but great to his former players, to the former people, to this, to that, to the other thing, okay? Remember the TBT over the summer? The La Familia team is playing in Philadelphia. He flies on his own dime to watch his former players in TBT in Kentucky uniforms. You could criticize the guy, but come on, man. He's supporting his former players. He's supported Mark Pope. He's said all the right things. And it's not your problem anymore. By the way, I think it was kind of I thought the goodbye message from him was actually genuine as well. He said, it's time for somebody else's voice to lead this program. You got a great coach. I agree with Dick Vitale. I could go on, but I feel like I'm kind of rambling and making the same point over and over. But I would just say this. Kentucky fans got a great coach. My personal opinion, it's time to let it go. We don't need the tweets every single time that Arkansas misses a wide open jumper. We know how you feel. We get it. You got a great team. If you want to talk that talk going into February 1st, I totally get it. Just feels kind of weird. Just going to say it from an outside. Feels kind of weird. All right, I'll tell you what. The chat is humming. I would love to get to some of these questions. I would love to get to some of these questions, but we have been on for well over an hour at this point here on a Thursday. So I'll tell you what, I do think it is time for me to get out of here. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, do me a favor. Please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, please make sure to go ahead and do that. Make sure to rate and review the show. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, go ahead and rate, review the show. Also, make sure you're following on social media. Aaron_Torres on Twitter, Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. TikTok account is humming as well, but do think it is time for me to get out of here. Appreciate the chat. The chat was humming. Thank you, by the way, to Collie Puffs as well. More information, colliepuffs.com. Appreciate everybody's support. I'm going to get out of here. We'll chat soon. Monday show. Probably talk a lot of college football. And then, of course, from there, hoops, everything full speed ahead. Appreciate everybody's support. Be back on Monday. Time to go. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head, unblocked.